Most freelancers undercharge. Not slightly, not at the margins, but significantly and consistently. They undercharge when they start because they don't know what to charge, and low feels safer than high. They continue undercharging because clients accepted the low rate and raising it feels risky. They compound the undercharging by not accounting for the costs that employment used to hide from them. And they end up working more hours than any salaried person they know for an effective hourly rate that would be embarrassing to say out loud, wondering why freelancing feels financially worse than a job that paid less on paper. The pricing problem in freelancing is not primarily a negotiation problem or a confidence problem, although those are real. It's a calculation problem. Most freelancers have never sat down and worked out what they actually need to earn per billable hour or per project to have a financially sustainable business. They started with a number that felt reasonable or that a client suggested or that they saw someone else charging, and they've been working from that number without ever connecting it to the actual math of their situation. The math, when you finally run it, is almost always a case for charging more. The calculation starts with what you need to earn in a year, not what you want, not what would be nice, what you actually need to cover your living expenses, your business expenses, and the financial foundations that employment used to provide automatically. That last category is where most freelancers underestimate their costs. When you're employed, your employer pays a portion of your payroll taxes, contributes to health insurance, provides paid vacation, covers sick days, and often matches retirement contributions. As a freelancer, all of those costs are yours. The 15.3% self-employment tax alone is a significant number that many new freelancers discover with shock at tax time. Health insurance, depending on your situation and location, can be substantial. Retirement contributions that have any chance of actually funding a retirement require a meaningful percentage of income. Vacation and sick time, for which you receive nothing when you take them, need to be built into your rate to avoid penalizing yourself financially for not working every day of the year. Adding these costs to your baseline living expenses produces your real target annual income. It will be meaningfully higher than most freelancers' intuitions about what they need. That's the first adjustment most people need to make. The second adjustment is billable hours. The assumption most people make when pricing is that they will bill something close to 40 hours per week, 50 weeks per year, which produces about 2,000 billable hours annually. That assumption is wrong. In most freelance businesses, the actual billable hours are significantly lower because a substantial portion of working time goes to activities that cannot be billed. Client communication and project management, proposals and pitches for work you may or may not win, administrative tasks, invoicing, accounting, contract review, marketing and visibility work to maintain a pipeline, professional development to stay current in your field, and the gaps between projects that are an inherent feature of most freelance businesses. Depending on the nature of the work, actual billable hours in a year range from 800 to perhaps 1,300 for most freelancers, not 2,000. Dividing your target annual income by your realistic billable hours produces your required hourly rate. For most people who have never run this calculation, the result is higher than the rate they're currently charging, sometimes significantly higher. And that's before adding any margin for business growth, equipment and software, professional services like accounting and legal, or the simple reality that your rate needs to account for the fact that you will not always be fully booked, and your rate during the months you are booked needs to cover the months you aren't. Project pricing, which is how most creative and professional freelancers structure their fees, requires converting this hourly foundation into a project rate. You estimate the hours the project will take, multiply by your required hourly rate, and add a buffer for scope uncertainty. The buffer matters because projects almost always involve more work than the initial estimate. And without a buffer, you're essentially discounting your rate every time a project runs long. A 15 to 20% buffer on project estimates is standard. For clients or project types with a history of scope expansion, higher. The rate you arrive at through this calculation is the rate you charge, not the rate you aspire to charge once you feel more established. The rate you charge now, because it's what your business requires to be financially viable. The fear that this rate is too high is almost always unfounded when the work is actually good and when the rate is communicated with confidence. Clients do not evaluate freelance rates in a vacuum. They evaluate them relative to the value of the work, the cost of the alternative, and the quality of the working relationship. A freelancer who charges a rate that reflects real skill, delivers reliably, and communicates professionally will find that clients at the higher rate are often better clients than those at the lower rate. Not always, but consistently enough to be a pattern worth counting on. The value pricing conversation takes this further and is worth understanding even if you don't fully implement it. Value pricing is the practice of pricing based on the value the work creates for the client rather than on the time it takes to produce. A piece of copy that generates significant revenue for a client is worth more than what it costs in hours to write, and pricing it at hourly rate times hours leaves money on the table that the client would have paid. A website that meaningfully increases a business's conversion rate is worth more than the development hours times a market hourly rate. When you understand the value your work creates, you can make a case for pricing that reflects that value, and that price is typically higher than hour-based pricing produces. Value pricing requires understanding the client's business, the problem you're solving, and the impact your solution will have. Not every project has easily quantifiable value, but asking the right questions during the scoping conversation, questions about what success looks like, what the current situation is costing the client, what the improved situation will make possible, gives you the information to have the value conversation rather than the hours conversation. Clients who are focused on value are better clients to work with and tend to be less resistant to rates that reflect the work's impact rather than its cost to produce. Scope definition is the other side of pricing that determines whether you actually earn what you quoted. A project priced accurately can still be financially damaging if the scope is not clearly defined and the client's expectations are not aligned with what was priced. The conversation about what is included in a project and what is not is one of the most valuable conversations in any freelance engagement, and it needs to happen before the work begins rather than when the first scope change request arrives. Contracts that define deliverables specifically, that include a revision limit and a process for out-of-scope requests, protect the rate you quoted by ensuring that additional work generates additional compensation rather than being absorbed into the original price. The revision limit conversation is uncomfortable for many freelancers because it feels like setting up a conflict before one exists. It is actually the opposite. Clear scope protects the relationship because it prevents the situation where a client expects unlimited revisions as part of the original fee and a freelancer feels exploited providing them. When everyone knows in advance that 2 rounds of revisions are included and additional rounds are billed at a specific rate, there is no conflict to have. The expectation is set. The client who wants more revisions pays for them. The freelancer who does more work gets compensated for it. A clear agreement serves everyone better than vague goodwill followed by resentment. Rate increases are where many established freelancers leave the most money. The rate you set in year 1 or year 2 of your freelance business should not be the rate you're charging in year 5. Your skills have grown. Your experience is more relevant. Your portfolio is stronger. Your market understanding is deeper. All of those things have value that didn't exist when the current rate was set. Existing clients who have been with you for years often present the most resistance to rate increases, and that resistance can make freelancers reluctant to raise rates even when market conditions clearly support it. The standard approach to raising rates is to notify existing clients well in advance of the effective date, typically 60 to 90 days, with a brief explanation of the new rate and when it takes effect. You do not owe extensive justification. The rate is changing because rates change as skills and experience grow, the same way salaries do in employment. Most established clients, particularly those who value the working relationship, will accept a reasonable rate increase without terminating the engagement. Some will not, and the clients who cannot accommodate a rate that reflects your current value are clients whose business economics may not support the work you're doing, which is information worth having. New clients always pay the new rate. There is no reason to offer new clients the rate you were charging 2 years ago, and doing so extends the financial impact of underpricing further into the future. New client relationships begin fresh, and the rate that applies to them is the rate your current skills and market position support. Retainer arrangements deserve specific attention as a pricing structure that benefits both sides when implemented correctly. A retainer is a recurring fee paid for guaranteed availability and a defined scope of ongoing work. For the client, it provides predictable access and often a slight discount relative to project rates. For the freelancer, It provides predictable income that smooths the feast and famine pattern of purely project-based work. Retainers are most appropriate for ongoing relationships with clients who have consistent recurring needs. The retainer scope needs to be defined as carefully as any project scope, with clarity about what the monthly fee includes and how work beyond that scope is handled. The pipeline question connects to pricing in a way that most freelancers don't initially recognize. When you're not fully booked, the temptation is to lower rates to attract work. This is the wrong response in most cases. Lowering rates to fill capacity attracts lower-rate clients who establish a new price anchor that's difficult to move from. It also signals to the market that your rate is negotiable downward under pressure, which creates a dynamic where sophisticated buyers apply that pressure systematically. A better response to underutilized capacity is to invest the time and visibility in relationships, in outreach to former clients, in portfolio development, in any activity that generates new leads at your actual rate rather than compromising the rate to generate immediate work. The clients who pay appropriate rates for quality work exist. They are not as scarce as the freelancers who undercharge believe them to be. They are simply not the clients who respond to discounted rates or who find freelancers through the platforms most associated with price competition. They find good freelancers through referrals, through visible expertise, through professional communities, through direct outreach that demonstrates an understanding of their specific problems. Building access to that client base takes longer than winning work on price. But the work is better, the relationships are more durable, and the financial result over time is not comparable. Pricing your freelance work correctly is not the whole business, but it is the foundation on which the business's sustainability rests. Everything else, quality, reliability, communication, relationships, growth, operates within the financial structure that pricing creates. A business price below what it needs to sustain itself is working against itself regardless of how good everything else is. Getting the pricing right, running the calculation honestly, charging what the math requires, is the first step toward a freelance business that actually works financially rather than one that works in every other sense while quietly failing in the one that determines whether you can keep doing it. Run the numbers. Set the rate. Charge it with confidence. Raise it as you grow. The math is not complicated. The discomfort of acting on it is real but temporary. The financial difference between freelancers who do this and those who don't compounds into years of work and money over the course of a career. The psychology of pricing deserves its own attention because it affects not just what you charge, but how you present what you charge and how clients receive it. Freelancers who are uncomfortable with their rates tend to communicate that discomfort in ways that undermine the rate before the client has even responded. They apologize before stating the number. They add qualifiers that suggest the rate is negotiable before anyone is asked. They present the rate as a question rather than a statement. These behaviors signal uncertainty to clients who are evaluating not just the price, but the confidence of the person they're about to trust with their work. A rate presented apologetically is a rate that invites negotiation. A rate presented as the natural result of what the work entails is a rate that most clients accept without significant pushback. The way to develop comfort with your rate is to practice saying it out loud, to understand exactly how you arrived at it, and to be able to explain that derivation if asked. You are not charging this amount because you think you deserve it or because you need the money. You are charging this amount because it is what the work costs when done at the level you do it, accounting for all the costs of running a professional freelance practice. That is a statement of fact rather than an assertion of worth, and facts are easier to state with confidence than assertions of personal value. Reframing the rate from what you're worth to what the work costs is a psychological shift that many freelancers find genuinely helpful in being able to state it clearly. The client qualification dimension is one that experienced freelancers take seriously and beginners tend to ignore. Not every client who wants to hire you is a client you should work with. Clients who open the conversation by asking what your lowest rate is are telling you something about how they value the work and how the engagement will go. Clients who negotiate aggressively before the scope is even defined are demonstrating that price will be the central concern throughout the relationship. Clients who expect quick responses to inquiries at any hour without accounting for that in the engagement structure are signaling expectations that aren't reflected in what they're willing to pay. Learning to read these signals early and to decline engagements that are structurally set up to be financially and professionally unsatisfying is a skill that takes time to develop, and that significantly improves the quality of the freelance practice when it does. The counterintuitive reality is that being selective about clients tends to improve both the work and the income over time. When you stop taking every engagement regardless of fit and start being intentional about which clients you work with, you spend more time on work that produces good results, which generates better portfolio material and stronger referrals. The clients who refer you are typically the clients you did your best work for, and you do your best work when the client relationship is good and the engagement structure is appropriate. Accepting every client at any rate produces a practice full of mediocre engagements that generate mediocre referrals and leave no time for the work that would actually build the business. The referral engine is the most efficient source of well-priced clients for most established freelancers, and it operates on a completely different logic than platforms or cold outreach. A client who is referred to you by someone they trust arrives with a different set of expectations than a client who found you through a marketplace. The trust is partly pre-established. The evaluation is often less price-focused because the referral source has already made the case for the value. The engagement tends to start better and proceed more smoothly. Building a practice around referrals rather than platforms takes longer in the early stages, but produces a client base that is more appropriate, better priced, and more likely to generate additional referrals. The process of generating referrals is not complicated, but it does require active effort. Doing excellent work is necessary but not sufficient, because clients don't automatically think to refer their freelancer to others unless something prompts them. Being explicit about the fact that you work by referral and that you appreciate introductions when appropriate prompts clients to think about it. Following up with past clients periodically, not to sell but to maintain the relationship, keeps you present in their minds when someone they know mentions needing the work you do. These are small, low-friction activities that have disproportionate impact on the quality and volume of inbound opportunities over time. The portfolio and visibility dimension connects to pricing because it establishes the context in which prospective clients evaluate your rate. A freelancer with a weak portfolio or minimal online presence who quotes a high rate is asking clients to take a significant leap of faith. A freelancer with a strong portfolio, clear demonstrations of past results, and visible expertise in their field who quotes the same rate is asking for a decision that is grounded in evidence. The portfolio does not need to be large. It needs to be good, specific to the type of work you want to be hired for, and accompanied by enough context that prospective clients can see how the past work relates to their current need. A portfolio of 5 excellent case studies that speak directly to your target client's situation is worth more than 30 examples of work from clients you'd rather not have again. The specialization question relates to pricing because specialists command higher rates than generalists in almost every freelance market. A writer who works across any topic at any level is a commodity. A writer who specializes in technical documentation for enterprise software companies is a specialist with a specific market whose clients have specific needs that not every writer can meet. The same work, performed with the same quality, is worth more from the specialist because the specialist understands the client's context in ways the generalist does not, which reduces the client's risk and improves the outcome. Developing and communicating a specialization, whether by industry, by deliverable type, or by the specific problem you solve, gives you a stronger basis for your rate and access to a segment of the market that competes less on price. The long-term view of freelance pricing is worth stating plainly. The rate you charge today is not the rate you will or should charge in 5 years. 5 years of excellent work, well-chosen clients, a strengthened portfolio, and developed expertise should produce a rate that is meaningfully higher than today's. Not through arbitrary annual increases, but through genuine growth in the value you deliver and the credibility that supports it. Freelancers who treat pricing as a static feature of their practice, setting a rate in the early years and never meaningfully revisiting it, leave an enormous amount of money on the table over the course of a career. The habit of reviewing your rate annually, evaluating it against your current skills and the current market, and adjusting it to reflect any meaningful gap, is the pricing equivalent of the performance review conversation in employment. It requires some discomfort and some risk, and it produces compounding returns that transform the financial trajectory of the practice over years. Price the work what it costs to do it properly. Raise the price as the work becomes more valuable. Charge every client what your current market position supports, not what an old client established or what you felt safe asking for when you started. The clients who deserve your best work are the ones paying for it fairly. Build the practice toward having mostly those clients and price in a way that makes that possible. The freelance business that does this is not just more financially viable. It is more professionally satisfying, more sustainable, and more likely to still be running in 10 years rather than burned out at 3. That is the whole case for taking pricing seriously. Run the numbers, set the rate, hold it with confidence, raise it as you grow. Everything else follows from that foundation being solid.